Welcome back to the Space School. I was on PPSW. Today we're back with a brand new Star Wars story. Today we're telling the story of what would have happened had Ahsoka Tano been the Chosen One. We'll be investigating her relationship with her peers and her mentors, or what her relationship with Anakin would have been like. Anakin will still be brought to the temple under the same exact circumstances, though for Ahsoka, while she was brought to the Jedi Temple in 33 BBY, she will be brought to the temple in 31 BBY. Before we get into this video, smash that like button. Let's try and shoot for 2,000 likes before the first 24 hours is over so that we will release the next video, which is what if Mother Talzin trained Anakin Skywalker. If you have ideas for videos, leave them down below. I do read all of your comments after all. And one last thing, if you want to support the channel, check out the Patreon, Twitch, and community Discord. Special shout out to George Story for being a grand tier on the Patreon. Thank you so much for all your support for the channel. If you want to learn how to win a free lightsaber, stay around to the end of the video and I will tell you exactly how you can do that. Our story begins on the planet Shili, where Jedi Master Plo Kun finds a young female Force-sensitive local. The child he located had a higher midichlorian count than Anakin Skywalker himself. Plo suggested that Anakin be allowed to enter the Order, but the 5-year-old girl from Shili was much more powerful than anything anyone in the galaxy had ever seen before. She was already fluent in the Force and well-versed in some of her own abilities. She was bright for her age, and Plo Kun knew that she needed to be brought back to the Jedi Temple. Inside the Jedi Order, the youngling Anakin Skywalker was struggling. He had no friends and he was bullied all the time. He was the most advanced member of his class, and he wasn't even able to progress or go above to the more advanced classes. Instead, he was restricted to staying inside of the class that he was in. Then, when things couldn't get anything worse for young Skywalker, everything got worse. Since the day he arrived, he was told he was the most powerful being in the Order, the most powerful being that the Order had ever seen, the destined Chosen One. The one prophesied to bring balance to the Force. And then, everything he had left, everything he had to hold on to, was taken away from him. He heard footsteps and turned around during class to see a masked Jedi Master carrying a little girl. She looked a bit timid, but the large Jedi kept walking towards a section of the Jedi Temple where there were private lesson rooms. Plo sat the girl down and sat across from her silently. She looked around and then Master Plo spoke.
Little Ahsoka, the Force surrounds you. Do you feel it?
The little girl nodded. Plo then continued, raising his hands like an orchestral conductor, melodically telling Ahsoka,
The Force binds the galaxy together, and in due time, you will learn how to use it better than even Master Yoda. I will be your guide throughout your journey.
Plo Kun would report back to the Jedi Council after getting Ahsoka acquainted with her new surroundings. Plo would then move to the center of the room, looking across the council, and then speaking delicately after removing the cloak from his head.
I found a young Shili girl. She appears to have a higher midichlorian count than that of young Skywalker. She is older, but not beyond our acceptance range. She is well versed in the Force, and she is very bright. I would like to motion to the council that I train her.
The council looked at one another, and in all agreement, they nodded their heads simultaneously. Plo was set to be Ahsoka's mentor. It wouldn't take long during her training with the other younglings for her to be moved into Anakin's class. Being younger than Anakin, this made Anakin almost jealous of her, but this jealousy would turn into an envious anger. When Plo requested the class teacher that she be moved into a higher class, this increased for Anakin. Anakin wanted to be moved out of the class for the longest time. He'd been atop of the class until Ahsoka passed him eventually. Not only did this ruin his morale, but it crushed his hopes and dreams of holding on to the legacy of the Chosen One, because it no longer seemed that he were welcome in the Order. They never made him feel that way, but Obi-Wan was never there to try and make him feel like anyone actually cared for him. On the other hand, Ahsoka would find pride in herself, but her master Plo Kun would be by her side to assist her throughout her training. Ahsoka did have a little bit of trouble with separating from her family. She was 5 years old after all, and she actually did have a connection with the family members, though even though she missed them, Plo Kun made sure that he took care of these emotions, and he would train her and assist her in the same way that would be normal for any other student. Plo was experienced enough to assist Ahsoka with these different endeavors that were specifically unique to her. Ahsoka would be given a little bit of a special treatment in a way, which also made Anakin even more jealous. He was slowed down by the inability to progress in his classes, and he was becoming mischievous towards the Order. Anakin would sneak out of the temple at night to seek adventure, and while he thought he was getting away with it, the council knew of what he was doing. They wanted to see if he would fail and some members wanted him to. While others suggested that they do something for him, the council was in debate with it, but the Master of the Order, Mace Windu, was very keen on it, insisting that Kenobi be the one to take responsibility for his future Padawan, not the council. Ahsoka would continue to progress throughout her training, and by the age of 10, she would be taken as a Padawan. Very young age for a Padawan, that is. The 15-year-old Anakin Skywalker saw her as an adversary by this point. She was a rival, and not in a healthy way. She made Anakin unhealthily angry towards her, because she simply progressed at an accelerated rate. Anakin at this point became tired of the Jedi customs, and on a mission with his master Obi-Wan Kenobi, his fate would forever be changed. Anakin was with his master, who was sleeping in the room next to him. Anakin couldn't sleep. He was up and angrily staring at the wall. He felt his power rising and his anger growing, and instead of his heart, it was racing. Anakin looked down onto his bed and lifted up his silver lightsaber. He twisted it around in his hand, looking down at the hilt, and then he snapped. He had enough. Anakin rose from his bed and walked out his door. Opening another door, he quietly stepped in. His heart kicked into heavy beats as he hovered over his master. Looking down at Obi-Wan, he ignited his lightsaber. Obi-Wan jutted up from his sleep and naturally pulled his lightsaber with the Force, igniting it. "This is the end for you, Obi-Wan." Obi-Wan was puzzled with blurry vision as he deflected a swing from his student and got to his feet. Anakin swung viciously, believing that he was superior to Obi-Wan. His arrogance filled his mind, believing that he could best Obi-Wan Kenobi in combat. Kenobi stumbled around the room looking at Anakin and balancing himself, and there was no one else to help him. But he knew he needed to disarm his apprentice without hurting him. Anakin pushed forward with anger in his eyes, but Obi-Wan used his legs to his advantage, kicking Anakin back. Obi-Wan and Anakin's blue blades illuminated the dark room. Anakin was a bit taken aback that Kenobi was beating him back. He expected this to be a landslide, a quick victory, but Obi-Wan wouldn't have it. Obi-Wan pushed Anakin back further and further, as Anakin pulled himself back, reeling from the blows from his master. Obi-Wan tried to get Anakin to surrender, but he wouldn't do so. He'd been through so much, he was tired of being a slave to the Jedi, and he wouldn't have it anymore. Anakin pushed back only for Obi-Wan to take advantage of this. Anakin was very clearly trying to kill his master. Obi-Wan didn't want to hurt him still, but he needed to defend himself no matter what. As Anakin pushed his offensive, he used both of his hands to jab forward. Obi-Wan spun away from Anakin while dragging his blade up. He cut off both of Anakin's hands. Anakin cried out in pain as he fell back. Obi-Wan frowned. His heart hurt. He didn't want to do it. He didn't want it to come to this either, but he did it. Obi-Wan looked at his apprentice and then pointed his blade at Anakin, getting him to yield. Obi-Wan got into contact with the Jedi Council and asked for a Jedi Master to come to take Anakin back to the temple for trial. The Council was in disbelief, but there happened to be a duo of Jedi that were close in proximity to both Anakin and Obi-Wan. Those two Jedi were Master Plo Kun and his prized apprentice, Ahsoka Tano. The two of them made their way to the planet that Obi-Wan was on. When Plo and Ahsoka arrived, Obi-Wan apologized and then informed the two of them that Anakin hadn't said a thing since he woke him up. Plo looked at Anakin and motioned for him to come with them. There was nothing he could do. He had no hands to hold his lightsaber, and his lightsaber was destroyed anyways. Plo and Ahsoka took Anakin back to the Jedi Temple for a trial. On their journey back to the Jedi Temple, Plo Kun walked out of a room for a second. The second the doors closed behind him, he heard Ahsoka scream out. Plo jerked himself around and opened the doors as he saw Anakin trying to hurt Ahsoka. Plo lifted his hands, and electricity came flying out of them as he yelled the word "stop." Anakin was sent tumbling into the floor. Ahsoka used the Force to keep him away from her, but the electric judgment was never seen before by Plo. He had never used this ability yet, and he really didn't know anything about it. Plo told Ahsoka,
"Go to the bridge. I will stay here with Skywalker."
The entire way back to Coruscant was long. They were in the Mid-Rim, so it was a journey to get from the Mid-Rim to Coruscant. But when they did, Plo immediately took Anakin to the council jury, as he took his place amongst his counterparts. Plo explained everything that had happened to both Obi-Wan and himself on the trip to Coruscant. The council believed that Anakin were unfit to be a Jedi, but he was also too powerful to be allowed to frequent the streets of the galaxy, so the Jedi decided to try him and then they'd have him immediately placed in the hands of the Republic for the trial of an assault of a Jedi officer. Anakin was exiled from the Jedi Order by the Jedi Council and placed into the hands of the Republic police. Anakin was extremely pained by this, and as such, he was taken to the court before the Republic, and he was eventually convicted of the crimes he committed, especially because Plo Kun's testimony against the former Jedi who attacked his Padawan. Anakin would be sent to the Grand Security Prison on Coruscant, where a powerful friend of his would help him secure bail and begin to train the young fool. Anakin's surprise to see Palpatine was immense, though he was grateful beyond belief. He finally had someone to take care of him. As for Palpatine, he finally had a prized apprentice, yet he still had some use for Count Dooku. Palpatine would take Anakin to the industrial sector of Coruscant and give him a place to stay, furthering his manipulation of the former Jedi. Anakin was thankful for what Palpatine had done for him, but this is where the real fun would begin for the Dark Lord of the Sith. Palpatine would begin to train Anakin Skywalker in the ways of the dark side of the Force. The dark side of the Force would empower Anakin to be more powerful than he would have ever been as a Jedi. After the trials, Plo Kun confronted the Jedi Council about what had happened with him and Anakin on the vessel. He spoke to the Council, saying,
"When I protected my apprentice, I shot yellow electricity from my fingertips. I wasn't using fear or anger or hatred. I reached out my hands in an effort to say stop, but this happened."
One of the council members spoke up. "Well, I believe you should take advantage of the opportunity, Master Plo. If it wasn't in hate, then it must be a gift from the Force." Master Yoda nodded in agreement. Master Plo bowed and then returned to his seat. The next 3 years would be tremendous for Anakin and Ahsoka alike. Anakin would be trained by both Dooku and Sidious, and he would grow into a powerful tool of the dark side, though the light to match him was now 13-year-old Ahsoka Tano. She was brighter than ever, reinvigorating the Jedi Order, and her prowess was prolific. Plo Kun was extremely proud of her for the young adult that she grew into, and she was near ready to pass the trials and become a Jedi Knight. She was still young, but very underestimated. She learned from one of the Order's best and brightest members, and she followed in the footsteps of her master. She was a terrific duelist, using 2 blades, the second of which being a smaller blade called a shoto. Ahsoka, though, could feel that something was off. Even more so, she picked up on it from her master, and it was the beginning of the Clone Wars. Though, for the worst-case scenario, Obi-Wan Kenobi was captured on Geonosis and was being prepared to be executed, not by animals in the grand arena, but by his former pupil. Anakin had grown to extreme power, but now he was on his way to Geonosis to kill Obi-Wan Kenobi. Obi-Wan had discovered the location of Kamino, all the same as he had in canon. Plo Kun and Ahsoka would be sent as the first wave to Geonosis to try and resolve things peacefully. But peace was never an option when Plo and Ahsoka stumbled upon a droid factory producing thousands of battle droids. Plo looked down at Ahsoka and said,
"Ahsoka, it's time for us to split up. I will search for Kenobi. You must inform Master Yoda of the Separatist incursion."
The 2 Jedi split up. As Ahsoka got into contact with Master Yoda on Kamino, Plo Kun snuck around until he heard a familiar voice. It was the voice of Master Yoda's last student. He continued listening to the voice and following the voice until he saw the Count enter a room with 2 guards. Plo then gently followed behind, using electric judgment to subdue the 2 guards that guarded the entrance. He walked in as he looked at Dooku, who was talking to Kenobi. Dooku whipped his head around, but Plo spoke first.
"Dooku, this need not turn into a battle. Peace is still an option."
Dooku grinned. He knew that there was more at play than just Geonosis or the Separatists. This was a proxy war. Dooku looked back at Kenobi, then to Plo. He surely could get out of this, but Plo was one of the best the Order had to offer. Dooku raised his hands, telling Plo, "I have become more powerful than any Jedi." Shooting electricity at Plo, who didn't react violently, but instead raising his hands and absorbing the power that was shot at him. Plo then surprised Dooku, but then shooting yellow and blue electricity back at him. Dooku used the Force to deflect the electricity into the ceiling, releasing Obi-Wan from his holding cell. Dooku ignited his lightsaber and looked at Plo, who readily ignited his, moving to get between Dooku and Kenobi. All of a sudden, Plo heard another lightsaber ignite, and as he turned, he saw crimson illuminating the face of a broken Anakin Skywalker, who was leaping into the air. Plo shouted,
"Skywalker!"
using the Force to grab the young Jedi in midair and throw him into the wall. Plo then spoke to Kenobi.
"Kenobi, get to my apprentice. I will cover your escape."
Kenobi nodded and ran for the door, and searched for the exit. As Plo moved steadily over to the door and began to back out, Dooku and Anakin moved forward. Anakin was more reckless than before. Kenobi kept Anakin at bay, but Palpatine gave a reckless child the ability to thrive and the inability to remain calm in any situation. Anakin lunged at Plo with any regard for the power of the Jedi Master. Plo parried twice before shoving the boy back to the ground. Dooku then followed in 3 precise attacks, putting Plo back onto his defense. Plo was quick to play back and forth with Dooku. Dooku, after all, was a fine, amazing duelist. Plo and Dooku locked blades, with the slight interjection of Anakin, who wanted a piece of the combat. Dooku pushed Plo back, and then Anakin ruined the momentum. Plo was playing in the Dooku's hands. The two of them had sparred before. This wasn't exactly new for either of them. They knew each other's moves well enough not to be surprised by any of them. Plo found the right moment to take advantage of Anakin's imbalance, and he used the Force to throw young Skywalker across the room into Dooku. Plo decided that the fight wasn't worth sticking around for, and so he turned and left the area. By the time Plo got to Kenobi and Ahsoka, the Grand Army of the Republic had arrived. The Jedi never had to attack the arena, and the battle on the ground commenced. The Separatists were caught off guard, and so their war effort was subdued quickly. The Clone Wars began rather quickly, and because of this quick beginning and rapid succession of Ahsoka Tano, she'd become the youngest Jedi ever to pass the trials at the age of 13. A non-arrogant, bright, and intelligent young Jedi ready to face commanding an army. She would be given the 501st Legion, which was a large task for her to handle, but the Council believed that she were ready and mature enough to handle the tantalizing task of leading an army into war. While the war was a tough task for someone as young as Ahsoka to handle, she was quite brilliant and handled the entire galactic conflict rather well. Assigned with a veteran from the Battle of Geonosis named Captain Rex, and another veteran from the Battle of Malastare Narrows named Yularen. Ahsoka was placed in a position to lead effectively, as a Jedi leader for the division. While her master and her would be paired together often, Ahsoka did quite well adapting without her master alongside of her. Ahsoka began studying battle plans with her captain, and she grew a close relationship with all of her men that she served with. She was a Jedi, like her master, who served on the front lines of combat, unlike the Jedi who stayed behind. And while Ahsoka had her own beliefs towards the war itself, she knew that sooner or later the war would end, and the Jedi could return to their peacekeeping again across the galaxy. Ahsoka, though, had picked up on something when she was on Geonosis. There was a small vessel, an interceptor-like ship. It didn't belong to the bounty hunter or to Count Dooku, and it sure wasn't a Geonosian ship. After she contacted Master Yoda, she looked inside of the ship. The ship's records contained planets that were really bizarre. Some of them were in the Outer Rim. Most of them were in the Outer Rim. One of the 3 planets was Crayus II, an ancient world that belonged to the Sith. And the other ones were Korriban, Coruscant, and Geonosis, which it was already on. Whoever had been using the interceptor had only been to these few distinct planets, all of which had a presence of the dark side, except for Coruscant. Ahsoka tracked the identification of the vehicle and continued studying it throughout the duration of the war. The war had its heroes and its villains. Dooku, Skywalker, Grievous, and Ventress were easily the villains, and even more so, Skywalker had a perfect victory track record. He was a vile creature to come across. Wielding that crimson blade of his, he'd been known to kill even Jedi Masters. The highest ranking Jedi Master that he killed was Jedi Master Eth Koth. The Separatists got up on an early lead on the Republic, but thanks to Jedi like Plo Kun, Ahsoka Tano, Obi-Wan Kenobi, and Mace Windu, the playing field wasn't as wide as it may have seemed. The war also saw its treacheries, like a betrayal of Sidious of the 2 of his most loyal dogs, Dooku and Ventress. Dooku was killed in cold blood, and Ventress escaped under the nose of the Sith. She vanished back to her homeworld of Dathomir. On Dathomir, she found herself an apprentice, who would eventually be led onto a spirit journey with her master in tow. During Ahsoka's stationing on Coruscant, she continued doing her research into what she found on Geonosis. By this time, Ahsoka would be around the age of 16. The war had been going on for a long while. She was a war veteran at this point. She'd watched men die, lost friends that she cared about, and covered the backs of those who she cared for most. Though there was something interesting for Ahsoka to discover. After several months, well, now they were years that had passed, she finally found the ship that she'd been looking for. Her master was also stationed on the planet, so she ran to the Jedi Council chambers to inform them of her discoveries. When she arrived, she greeted the masters before her. Most of them weren't present. They were mostly out on campaign. Shakti was on Kamino and Windu wasn't present. Yoda, Saesee Tiin, and Plo Kun were the only ones present, and so they listened to Ahsoka as she told them what she found. She found that a ship from Geonosis was just back on Coruscant. She tracked it to the industrial sector of the planet, and believed that the Sith were present inside of that complex. Most of the time, it seemed as if the ship were going during the night, and was arriving after another vessel that could be seen leaving a Coruscant high-rise that was close to the Senate building. A lot of coincidences, but the Jedi needed to act quickly. The time between arrival and departure usually was about roughly an hour. Plo Kun jumped to his feet, as did the other Jedi. They followed Ahsoka down to an awaiting LAAT, as it took off with the coordinates to where Ahsoka had tracked the interceptor. Anakin used a different ship for combat, and another one for arriving on Coruscant, so that he wouldn't be tracked back to his master's lair. Though it was already clear that in his young age and his arrogance, it proved to be his own downfall. The LAAT landed inside of the open bay as the 4 Jedi jumped from the ship. Ahsoka was allowed to come along because she not only had the trust of the entire council, but she was also more than strong enough to hold her own in combat. After all, throughout the war, she'd almost defeated General Grievous several times. The 4 Jedi cautiously maneuvered out of their LAATs while telling the ball gunners to keep their weapons placed on the 2 ships, ensuring that neither of the Sith escaped. The Jedi walked around the corner as they saw a man with long, flowy, curly hair that looked as if it hadn't been washed in weeks, and a cloaked man who was shorter standing next to him. The cloaked one turned around and spoke the words, "The Jedi." Master Plo was quick to get everyone ready for the combat that would ensue, as he spoke the words quickly.
"Ready yourselves."
4 blades ignited, blue and green brightened the shadows of the evil lair. On the other side, Sidious pulled out 2 lightsabers of bleeding red, while his apprentice shadowed his movements with 1 lightsaber being ignited. The 4 Jedi cautiously spread out into a semicircle, surrounding the Sith, as Sidious made his first move, singling out Saesee Tiin, and lunging across the room with an ancient Sith howl. At the same time, Anakin jumped forward and collided blades with Ahsoka. Sidious then pushed an assault on Yoda and Plo Kun, 2 fearsome duelists, after he just killed Saesee Tiin. Ahsoka would get kicked in the chest as she fell back. Anakin then would turn his attention to his master, who was on the verge of losing the battle. Anakin showed that he was in there somewhere, choosing to save the person who cared for him rather than seek revenge first, showed that Anakin Skywalker was still in there somewhere. As Anakin turned around and jumped into attack position behind the Jedi Grand Master, Yoda turned around too late, to only see the blade of Vader crest into his chest. Ahsoka and Plo both looked over as they watched Yoda fall lifelessly to the ground. Plo then perked his head up to see the blade dashing towards him. He blocked it away as he jutted himself around into a defensive position from Palpatine. Ahsoka got back up, only to see Anakin coming her way. She threw out her Shoto and let Anakin fall for the bait. As he chased the Shoto, Anakin swung down with all of his might as he connected with the little blade, but watched from the corner of his eye as Ahsoka twisted around him effortlessly, using her main blade to cut into the back of him. Anakin dropped his blade as he himself fell lifelessly to the ground. Sidious whipped his head around to see his prized apprentice die before his eyes, as he was brought back to the moment by one of his lightsabers being cut in half out of his hand. Palpatine steadied himself back as Ahsoka moved to counter him. Plo steadied himself forward and faked an attack as Ahsoka pushed an assault. Sidious whipped himself around and caught her blade. Plo begins to attack, but Before he can connect his blade with Sidious, Fort Lightning shoots out from one of Sidious's hands, connecting with Plo's blade. The electricity covered the blade, as Plo then shouted to his apprentice.
Now,
Ahsoka pushed her blades up, as she used her flexibility to drop back to the floor while kicking Palpatine's hand up and the lightsaber out of it. Ahsoka then jumped up, using her Shoto and driving it into the chest of Palpatine. Plo then follows down as he connects his blade with the Sith Lord. The lightning stops as he falls lifelessly to the floor. Plo then looked over at his apprentice and sheathed his blade. She does the same as he places his hand on her shoulder.
I am very proud of you, Ahsoka. You have become an incredible Jedi, far greater than I could ever be. You have begun a new era of peace for the galaxy.
Ahsoka smiled at her master. Plo then looked over at the fallen Jedi Masters and spoke quietly of them.
We must first remember those who have moved on.
Picking up Saesee Tiin, as Ahsoka picked up Yoda, the two Jedi returned to the LAATs and headed back to the Jedi Temple. While the time of war was dense, the few Jedi Masters who could return for the funeral made their way back to Coruscant. With Yoda having been killed, the Jedi Council needed to elect a new Grand Master, a Grand Master of which would become Plo Kun. He would take the role with pride, but with the care and responsibility of that belonged to the Grand Master, that the Grand Master needed to have. Ahsoka would continue her sieges on the battlefront. Since the war had begun to sway in the hands of the Republic, the war effort would continue. As for Separatist leadership, General Grievous would assume full control of the Droid armies, and this would be beneficial to the Separatists. But the truth is that the Separatist government wanted peace. They wanted the war to end. And so, the next 2 years, the Clone Wars would drag out into contested battlefronts, of which battles were hard fought, and would take the entire morale of the fighting side to pull a victory. Ahsoka at this point was now 18, and the Galactic Senate and the Separatist Alliance government completed their peace treaty. Ahsoka had a positive view on the galaxy from here on out, but there was something awry in the Force, though she couldn't focus on that. With the war ending, she had time to finally do something she had always wanted to do, take on an apprentice of her own. And so, she took on a young female Jedi, Rodian, named Anastar Garkau. Though Ahsoka came up with a nickname Star, not just because of the stars in Anastar's eyes, but for the bright heart of her young Padawan. The two had an immediate bond. Ahsoka was everything her master was for her, caring, kind, thoughtful, and uplifting, while being exactly what the student needed. Anastar loved her master dearly, and she wanted to impress her at every turn. Ahsoka, though, was already proud of her student. She was the pride of her life. The two would journey down into the underbelly of Coruscant to help clean up the darkened parts of the city. The Jedi were back on the path of peace, and with Plo Kun leading the Order, they began to reach out further into the depths of the Outer Rim. The fall of Anakin Skywalker was the motto to lead the Jedi down a path of redemption. Sadly, he had to be the reason why they learned, but because of his failures, they were able to find themselves a path of renewal. Ahsoka and her apprentice Anastar were sent out on a mission with Jedi Council member Obi-Wan Kenobi to the planet Tatooine to discuss trade routes with the Hutts and talk about lessening their powers in the Outer Rim. It would be a tantalizing task. The Hutts loved their power, and even more so, they loved their money. But the Jedi wanted to dissuade the Hutts from gaining off crime. There were benefits involved, and the reunited Republic was willing to initiate programs to get the crime lords into helping the people of the galaxy rather than profiting off of them. Chancellor Bail Organa was very focused on bringing the galaxy back together, and this started by showing the Outer Rim that the galaxy still cared about them. With the Jedi serving in mercy missions across the galaxy, it was becoming evident to the backworld planets that the Republic was back in full force, back to liberate the galaxy from the hate and crime of the powerful crime families located out there. Peace in the Outer Rim hadn't existed since the time of the High Republic, almost 400 years beforehand. Master Yoda used to talk about it to one of his oldest council members, Plo Kun, who was approaching the age of 300. Plo Kun had also returned to his homeworld of Keldor to see if the Barando sages wanted to assist in the galaxy. The Barando sages were a group of Force-based Keldor that helped the people of their planet. They were essentially a bunch of Plo Kun situated in the planet that existed between some black holes and space nebulas. The Barrando sages were willing to oblige, and the Republic would reward them handsomely, with assistance and technology to bolster the civilization that suffered from massive storms that Keldor was prone to. Kenobi, Ahsoka, and Star's trip to Jabba's palace was more than successful, but it also led to something that the Jedi were unaware of. During the Clone Wars, a group of Dathomirians came and took over the crime families, putting them all under the branch of leadership known as Crimson Dawn. 3 leaders, a witch, and 2 Zabrak brothers, 1 yellow and 1 red. Ventress, Maul, and Savage. Kenobi couldn't believe what he was hearing from the Hutt crime lord, but what the crime families were subjected to was making them more voluntary to work with the Republic than ever before, and so a deal was made between the Hutt clan and the Republic to reform its ways as long as they removed the Dathomirians from the power. Kenobi would be sent from Tatooine to meet with the Pike Syndicate, while Jedi Master Agan Kolar would be sent to negotiate the same kind of deal with the Black Sun. Plo Kun, Ahsoka, and Anastar would be sent to the planet Dathomir to interact with Mother Talzin about possible information regarding those who worked with the crime families. Plo wanted to talk to Mother Talzin for another reason. Once the 2 Jedi came up with no answer, Plo Kun then sat down with Mother Talzin and asked her a question.
Mother Talzin, I would like to ask you if you would like to work in coalition with the Jedi. We know you use the power of the Force, but I believe if we can unite together, we can banish any evil from the galaxy. You wouldn't have to leave Dathomir, but you'd operate much like my relatives in the Barrando Sages, free to yourself, but with a gesture towards the betterment of the galaxy.
Mother Talzin would respond that she believed the offer was interesting. The Jedi and the Dathomir witches had never been on the same page, but she was willing to give it a try. Plo then spoke back to her when she was finished talking, saying that
it is a pleasure being able to bring the 2 together after all this time, where we belong, standing side by side.
Ahsoka and Anastar made their way for Ryloth. They wanted to check in on the leaders of the Twi'leks. Syndulla hadn't been in contact with the Republic for some time. It was an uncommon occurrence. Even more so, the Republic troops had just left the system about a week ago, due to the post-war agreement between Syndulla and the Republic. When the 2 Jedi landed on the planet, they heard screaming. They ran into the massive house of Syndulla. Alina was screaming as she watched 2 large Zabraks walk towards her husband and her daughter. A little astromech was flipped upside down, while a tiny witch stood on top of the droid. They were trying to add Ryloth to their little criminal empire, but that was ending today. Ahsoka stood in front of her apprentice, who ignited her blue blade. Ahsoka, on the other hand, ignited 2 white blades. She had come full circle. She was an agent of peace, and her entire being of that was at peace. She didn't have malicious intent, nor a thought of revenge. She herself was the definition of balance. Partially to her master, but even more to her determination to what the Jedi needed to be. 6 crimson blades illuminated. Ahsoka looked back at her apprentice and told her to get the family out of here, and get them and herself far away. Ahsoka approached the 3 red-bladed Dathomirians. Each of them had 2 blades, 2 double-sided lightsabers, and Ventress herself had 2 individual ones. Ahsoka used the Force to push them all to the ground, and as she did, she motioned the family to run. The family popped up, and the droid named Chopper followed them, throwing out droid language that sounded like insults to the horned people. Ahsoka knew that she was in this alone, but she was ready. She could do this. She was in balance and harmony with the Force. As the larger one approached her, she used the Force to steer him away as she jumped back into the courtyard outside of the house. Ventress jumped into the air as Maul ran with intense speed. Ahsoka threw a blade up and another in front of her as she caught both Ventress and Maul in a duel, interlocked in battle. Ahsoka then spun the dust around her with her feet as she twisted her blades away from the 2 Sith as she jumped into the air. The 2 Sith jabbed their blades forward, inwards, to see that Ahsoka was missing. She was no longer there. As Savage ran out to see where she had gone, 2 thin feet landed on his shoulders as he started spinning around in circles. The behemoth Zabrak started swinging everywhere, almost hitting his brother in the face with his blade. Ahsoka jumped off and kicked her foot into the jaw of Ventress as she tumbled to the ground heavily. Ahsoka turned as Maul brought his blade to meet hers. She was quick. She twisted his blade around as Savage swung down. Ahsoka stepped back and twisted her blade forward, cutting Savage's double-edged blade in half. She kicked him back with her feet as she bent backwards to parry Ventress. As she bent back, she kicked herself over Ventress and got behind her. Her blade slipped through Ventress's back, and as she did, instantaneously she killed the witch. As Ahsoka danced around the courtyard, she collided blades with Maul again. Maul was unsteady. He hadn't fought anyone with a lightsaber since he lost to Kenobi, and it showed. As Ahsoka contorted herself around, cutting through the Sith and his brother simultaneously. Both dropped as Ahsoka looked down to see if they were still alive, and then sheathing her lightsabers to look back and see her Padawan watching from the hill, in awe with the Syndulla girl. Ahsoka shook her head and smiled gently at her Padawan, and the family she had just saved. Ahsoka could feel it through the Force. She had secured balance, and even more than that, Plo brought the Sisters of Dathomir and the Jedi together. The most powerful Force users in the galaxy now worked in unison. The steps forward for the Republic started slow, but they would eventually speed up. Ahsoka would become a master on the Jedi Council after her apprentice Anastar Garkau became a Jedi Knight at the age of 17, following in her master's footsteps of passing the trials early in her life. Ahsoka became predominantly known for her Blades of Purity. Under Plo Kun, the Jedi Order would expand its reach in the newly unified galaxy of peace and justice for everyone of every planet. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is our story. Again, special thanks to George Story for supporting the channel. Let's hit 2,000 likes so that we can see what if Mother Talzin trained Anakin Skywalker in the next video. If you want a chance to win a free lightsaber, down below is a doc link. What you have to do is just go put your name down on the docs, and that's it. You just put your name down. I'll be giving away 1 lightsaber on June 4th of 2022, and that's like in 2 weeks. So you might have put your name down now before those lightsabers go away. If you want to see a what if, let me know down below. I do read all of your comments. Check out the Twitch, Discord community, and Patreon if you want to be a part of the community or support me in other ways. Let's get into our discussion about this story. I really think this is a special story. I'm going to be honest here. I'm quite proud of this one. Originally, I didn't want Anakin to turn to the dark side, but I thought it'd be really interesting if Anakin actually fought Ahsoka, but if he saw her as a rival. And before I did my research for the video, I did my numbers wrong, and I thought Ahsoka came to the temple after him, so I kind of got the idea for the story down. I was like, oh wait, let me just double check these numbers, make sure they're alright, and they weren't. So I switched the years around. Ahsoka comes to the temple in 31 BBY instead of 33 BBY. So it works out. She comes to the temple 2 years late, and that's okay. That works perfectly fine. And I think what happened here was actually really kind of interesting. Ahsoka had a much different look around at how the Jedi operated, and I think having a master like Plo Kun would have really helped her cement herself in the light side of the Force. I think Ahsoka just having that extra little oomph guiding her would really make her a great Jedi. And I think even more so, I think she'd be a great duelist. And while I didn't focus a lot on that training, I kind of want you to assume that with Plo Kun being her master, she would be a great Jedi. I mean, Plo Kun is just an amazing Jedi, and I think him training someone that he literally found would only amplify their relationship together as master and apprentice. Even more so, I think Ahsoka would be much more powerful than Anakin would have ever been, because I'm keeping Anakin's power the same. I just made Ahsoka more powerful than him. That's the only difference. The only difference here is that Ahsoka is just more chosen than the chosen one. So I guess that's the kind of ironic thing that we got going on here. I think the betrayal of Dooku and Ventress would have been very interesting, but I also wanted Ventress, Savage, and Maul to have their own time here to actually get to fight Ahsoka. I don't think Ahsoka would have been beat. I think Ahsoka would have been able to wipe the floor with everybody. But I thought that was an interesting little extra battle, because you don't really expect it. You don't really know where I'm going at the end of this, because I kind of threw away a little line there in the middle of the story just to be like, oh, why did you bring that up? So you forget about it, so that I could bring this back and it'd be a nice little reveal for you in the end that I'm like doing another battle. Another thing I want to talk about is my apprentice for Ahsoka, and that is Anastar Garkau, or Gaukau. I don't even know how to pronounce the name that I wrote, but it's Garcau, and she's a Rodian, and I thought that'd be an interesting pair, having a Rodian and Ahsoka together. But overall, I think it'd be really cool. Also, something that I have to say I'm really quite proud of is the little interaction between Plo Kun and Mother Talzin. It's just another one of those weird things, like Pong Krell and Anakin from the other day. It's just one of those weird things that kind of works out in a weird way. I don't know. I just feel like that would work out. So anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this video as much as I did making it. Again, check out all those things, and special thanks to George Story once again. Anyways, I love you all. Spread the love, my friends, and always remember, may the Force be with you.